So what I want to offer to you this evening are four principles of restoration that will give you a framework for um, undertaking any restoration job. So these are across the board general principles. And here are the four of them in summary. First of all, we just need to know what restoration is and distinguish it from other forms of work you can do on your home. A second principle will be talking about architectural integrity and how that provides guidance for restoration. We'll talk about wabi-sabi, and which is an appreciation for beauty of things as they age. It's more complicated than that, but that's a good summary now. And then fourth, we'll talk about period appropriate enhancements. So when something in an old house needs attention, there are at least four things you can do with it besides complain about it and or ignore it. So you can repair it, refresh it, replace it, or restore it. So we'll break that down and that'll give us a context for understanding restoration. Basically, restoration includes all the three above, but isn't limited to any of them. So repair means fixing what is broken. Uh, uh, um, So if you have a window that has a missing chain, that's repair work. That's not restoration. Restoration would be restoring the whole window. Problem with repair work, all too often it's reduced to jerry rigging. For instance, especially on entryway doors. I don't know that I've ever seen an entryway door that didn't have some kind of jerry rigging. It's understandable because it's a high security issue, and so everything gets done quickly. But and not something else that one can do to a house work is to refresh it, cleaning, polishing, refinishing, resurfacing. And these are all legitimate things, and sometimes they are integrated into restoration work. So sometimes we have a wood finish that's in basically good condition. It's just kind of tired. And so we just clean the top layer of varnish and then refresh it with fresh coats of varnish. And it's amazing what you can do with that. The problem with refreshing things is that covering up things with paint that need attention doesn't make the damage go away. And so a lot of things have been painted just because it hides the problems. Whenever I get someone, we take on a job of restoring an entryway door that has is painted. I first of all ask myself, why was this painted, and what are we going to find underneath? Replacement. If it can't be repaired, refreshed, or restored, replace it. Well, the problem with this is the decision is often made without investigation of the options. I don't know how many people I've talked with potential clients who have said, "Oh, I didn't know that it could be done. I didn't know that you could restore windows." So, and there's a kind of forcefulness in our culture because we live in a replacement culture. There's a kind of gravitational pull towards replacement. Um, and it's not always the best option. Replacement is most often incompatible with the period of the house. So I said restoration includes all of these three, but is not limited to it. Sometimes you have to replace parts. Sometimes you do refresh or refinishing. Repair work is certainly involved. What distinguishes restoration from those other partial tasks is its holistic nature. To restore something is to bring the whole element back as close as possible to its original condition while preserving the desirable effects of aging. So, that doesn't mean you make it like mint new. The Smithsonian, when they started working on antiques, they did sand everything down to raw wood and then refinished it. Well, that wasn't a historic restoration, and they soon learned that that was not the way to go. And so it's not like we try to make it as if it were there yesterday, but we try to make it as sound and integrated as possible. The big problem is that at least initially, this is more costly. It also requires greater skill than the other things you can do. The payoff is down the road because of its quality, because of its beauty, its long term. Um, so you pay a lot to restore something, but you get more. If you've ever bought anything used on a resale shop and done your own work on it, you realize that you ended up paying as maybe as much or near as much as you would have to buy something new, but what you get is much, much higher quality. So let me give some examples of this. Oh, first, I forgot about this slide. Because replacement is so common, I thought I'd go into a little bit about, say, what you get, what you lose when you replace something. You lose architectural integrity most often. We were talking earlier before the seminar about reproduction versus antiques, and reproduction just don't do it for me. But they are an acceptable substitute if you can't find the original. The quality of materials and craftsmanship. Uh, um, we are not as skilled as we were 100 years ago with our hands because everything is being done factory made. And so there's incredible quality in all of your homes, your 100-year-old bungalows. We're built with different kinds sets of skills. We lose beauty. In our age, I claim we are an increasingly ugly culture because we have substituted mechanistic precision for beauty. The iPhone, it's not beautiful, it's just precise. It's very sleek. But beauty is it's not isolated to things of the past, but certainly many of the things of the past have great beauty and uniqueness to them that's worth preserving. Repairability. So maintenance free, we think that's really something to aspire to. Well, the problem with that is it also means maintenance impossible. And we also lose the benefits of aging. So restoration. Let me give you an example. I'm going to start with my own house here. Before I purchased this bungalow, this is what it looked like. Now, the windows weren't in bad shape, but and I could have just refreshed them, put on a fresh coat of paint. But I wanted to restore them. So restoring these windows meant stripping them back down to bare wood, doing any repair work that needed to be done on the wood, and then priming them and building up the paint again. But that's not all. Restoration isn't just about doing those structural things, it's also about the aesthetics. To do a complete restoration job, you also need to pay attention to color. And so I did. I decided that I wanted to choose a color for these windows that was appropriate to the age of the bungalow. Keep in mind that color is an aspect of culture, so it changes all the time. Our tastes change, and so there are characteristic colors that are associated with any given architectural style. All these paint companies, Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, they have all of those formulas in files. They don't market them, except in their historic section of their fan decks. So you can find what historic colors are in that section of the fan deck, and they also sometimes produce particular portfolios or folders. And Sherwin-Williams was top gun back in the 20s. They were much more bigger than Benjamin Moore, and they were particularly keen on the arts and crafts movement and have developed the colors that were characteristic of that age. So I chose a color. It's called moss green. And to me, the interesting thing about this is that color just doesn't just sit on the windows. It feels part of the house. And that's the thing about when you restore something consistent with the age, with its age period, uh, is that it feels like it belongs. And in some ways, it kind of disappears because it not disappears, but becomes so integrated with the whole that it's hard to distinguish it. That's one of our goals when we leave a house was we want it in some ways to be as if we had never been there, or that as if no one could detect what we had done, except that it looks nicer than it used to. What is interesting to me is the difference between these. That generic white, it just does nothing for any building, I think. But that green gives it distinction and it makes it stand out and makes the windows appear with the distinction that they are. It's a beautiful part of the building. Here's what the interior looked like when I purchased it. Once again, there's no attention to period. There are the George Jetson 1950s pendant lights hanging down. For the life of me, I can't figure out why they hung those there, but they did. And baby blue paint, and of course, all the woodwork is painted. Um, I'm in process. I'm still not done with this room, but here's what it looks like now. So the paint on the wall is from that same arts and crafts um, catalog or folder, this folder that I showed you. It's called Bird's Eye Maple. And the stain on the windows frames is a, uh, a mixture that I made up myself, but it is consistent with the style of the or the period of the house. The little sconce there is interesting, that wood sconce. Um, um, Back in the day, when they made plaster walls, they would cover them up with a canvas liner, a kind of thick wallpaper. The intent was that it would hide cracks in the plaster because they knew that inevitably there would be cracks. Well, when I took down the canvas liner on it from my living room, I found six um, electrical boxes for sconces. So I knew I had to put some sconces in there. And these were made by a colleague of mine who's really gifted. But they go well with the period of the house. Just because something is old doesn't mean it's consistent with the architecture, the original period. This is an old finish, but it's not as old as the house. The house is a Victorian house. It was built in the 1880s. This is like a 60s, 1960s blonde finish that is well, kind of green, actually, and just not, it doesn't do anything for the stairwell, doesn't capture the grandeur of this elaborate stairwell. So one of the things we did was to strip it down and to stain it a color that was more consistent with the age of the house and the dignity of the house. It's interesting the way in which things that are restored have a quality of dignity to them. It's hard to explain. It has to do with the fact that they're integrated. All the parts are unified in one, and everything is working together. I wish I had taken better pictures here, but you can see off to the right on there's this landing. That door goes off to the kitchen, but there are three stained glass windows there. We restored those as well, and we also replaced the treads on the stairwell. So that is moving towards a restoration because we attended to everything. There were also a few moldings here that we had to reproduce and replace. Here's another project that uh, was a restoration project. And there wasn't just one thing we had to do with that. First of all, you can see that the mantle was not fully stripped. Here's the finished product, and the mantle was so we had to strip that down. And you notice the a grout is pretty dilapidated. So we had to dig out all the grout, which was an ordeal because it was cement. And I ruined three diamond-studded blades getting all that grout out. And the final, or oh yeah, I forget. In this shot shows you the poor state of the tile. All of the sheen had worn off of it, and now, as a speaking of wabi sabi, if you had a closer look at this tile, it's very interesting because it's over the ages, and so it's very nice, but certainly not with that kind of dull finish. So I found a glaze that was intended precisely for this to restore the patina on ceramic tile that has lost, and it really, really transformed it. The last thing we did was to wax that hood on the above the firebox. I originally now this is an interesting thing in terms of refreshing, because initially had the intention of polishing it back to its a brass hood, and I was going to polish it back to its original condition. But that would have been a big mistake, and I quickly realized that the aging of the patina was part of it and needed to be left that way. Here's a room that we restored. We didn't just paint. We didn't just repair the plaster. We didn't just refinish the wood. We did all of that, and we restored the windows as well. And this is what it looked like when we were done. Um, it's interesting that this window on the left here, the stained glass window, wasn't there, right? Um, but you see that the window opens onto a brick wall. That's the condominium next door, so there's nothing to look at. So I suggested to the homeowner that we have it fill it with stained glass, and this glass was consistent with the period of the condo units, and so it fit very well. We had to have an art glass artisan fill it out, so some of that border was added on so that it fit in the double hung opening. But that's what I call enhancement of an architectural element that is consistent with the period. So it's creative, it's something new, but it's entirely consistent with the style of the space. Restoration recovers architectural integrity. There's a wholeness to it. Another word for integrity is dignity. Or another word for that would be presence. And something that's restored has a kind of presence to it. It has a wholeness and a sense of standing up, of being upright. To me, the white painted windows just don't do anything, don't call your attention to it. But the restored windows painted a color consistent with the age of the house. Um, has much more sense of what you might call dignity. So that's restoration. Restoration is a holistic approach, bringing everything back to as close as possible to the original condition, and incorporating all the other kinds of work, repair work, refreshing, replacing. Sometimes you have to replace hardware, but it's all done with an attempt to bring it back to the period in which it was originated. So let's look at architectural integrity. Maintaining, restoring, and enhancing architectural integrity provides the guidance for restoration. And here's a definition of this. It's the original character and features of a building as designed by the architect and or in keeping with the historical period in which it was built. Here's a sample of a house that has a fair amount of architectural integrity. We just restored the windows here, but the client asked that we restore them to a shellac finish because that's what was original. They were very invested in restoration and maintaining architectural integrity. Notice the lighting, which is period lighting. They had wonderful original lighting. And even they had original hardware, that transom window operator. Here's a place where they didn't have original. That bottom window isn't in shadows because it's lower than the top one. It's in shadows because it's a different kind of glass. The original glass is on the left. The replacement glass is on the right. Now, some of you might recognize this. I have this glass on the left in my bathroom, and many of you may have it as well, because 100 years ago, this was the standard kind of decorative privacy glass that was used. Don't ask me why, how, but supposedly this glass on the right is supposed to be a reinterpretation or a reproduction of the style of the design on the left. I can't see it. Anyway, we were fortunate enough to find a piece of glass large enough for that bottom sash, so we were able to restore it with the original glass. This fireplace is in an architect-built house, and it was built in the arts and crafts style and had amazing features of beautiful house, beautiful features. For the life of me, I cannot figure why in a house like that anyone would have ever painted the brick on a fireplace. Arts and crafts style is favors organic materials and anything that is as staying as close as you can to nature. Well, that includes brick. Brick is more organic than painted brick. And so we stripped it down and uh, refinished the mantelpiece. I had to use a kind of stain to get the last paint haze out of, but here's what it looked like when we're done. See the beautiful sconces. Those were just amazing sconces, and that's all throughout the living room. That black border around the ceiling, we did restore that as well. We had to strip it down and refinish it, and we refinished it to the stain color. It was characteristic of the era. That's why it feels like it fits. Here is a architectural gem that has been smothered in paint. Looks more like wedding cake fluff than paint. And we didn't just strip this one down. There are a lot of things that had to be done to it, but here's what it ended up looking like. With the restoration approach in mind, we had three issues that needed attention. paint removal, and then we found a bunch of water stains on the countertop. The mirror frame had separated from the cabinet and from the wall, so that was a dangerous situation that had to be dealt with. And there was degradation of the corbels. So here's when we took the mirror out. Here you can see the separation. If you look on the bottom, there's about an inch separation between the cabinet and the wall. And then on the top image, you see that black line. That's where the frame of for the window or for the glass was separated from the cabinet. So we first of all connected or reattached the frame to the body of the cabinet, and then we put in shims and reattached the cabinet to the wall. Now you can't see any of that work. That's all hidden, but it's there and you experience it. There's a kind of solidity that something takes on if it has been well cared for, if it's been made solid. So even things that you don't see have an effect on the experience of it. Back in this is the corbels. They were covered with a composition acanthus leaf. So let me tell you quickly. Back in the beginning of the Victorian era, everything was hand carved. And towards the end of the era, hand carving became too expensive. And so someone had the bright idea of mixing sawdust with hide glue and using forms to make reproductions of many of the motifs. And so we replace these worn out ones with these reproduction ones and then reattach them. There are 25 corbels. And that's how it looks when it's done. Beautiful quarter sawn oak, just incredibly rich oak. And we use a varnish that is as close to the finish that it would have been at the period. I never use polyurethane. I have great disdain for polyurethane, not only because it looks plastic, but because it is a bitch to strip out. And so you're not doing the next guy any favor if you put a polyurethane finish on something. Restoration recovers wholeness. It becomes integrated and has a standalone sense about it. And that cabinet on the top, well, it's just there. The cabinet on the bottom, it announces itself and calls attention to itself. Not in an ostentatious way, but as something worthy of the room. Restoration, bringing the whole element back, not just repairing what is broken, as close as possible to its original condition, maintaining and enhancing architectural integrity, while preserving the desirable effects of aging. So let's turn to wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is a Japanese tradition. It's part of traditional Japanese culture, and it is an appreciation for the beauty of aging and for the even the beautiness and ugliness. Appreciation for the beauty in aging helps us determine how to engage in a restoration project without a perfectionist mentality. There's a balance between restoring something to its original condition and appreciating the desirable effects of aging. So they didn't try to make this new, but you can tell that stool has been taken care of. Even imperfections become desirable. Wavy glass, you may have heard of wavy glass, and there's a myth going around that it's wavy because it's melting. Yeah, that's not it. Not why it's wavy. It's wavy because there were imperfections in the manufacturing process. And the divided light, why do we have divided light? And why do we call it lights? Well, because the first glass was hand blown. They couldn't hand blow large pieces. This was about as large as they get, an 8 by 10 piece of glass. And so they divided the window up into parts. And they called it lights because you couldn't actually see through it. and so they just emitted light. And what's fascinating to me is these imperfections have now become aesthetic richness. The wavy glass is beautiful, and the divided light as well. Wabi Sabi is an appreciation for the beauty and the imperfection and the organic because of the passage of time. It's finding beauty in the simple and the seemingly insignificant. Whatever our situation, there is beauty hiding everywhere. So it includes a lot more than just architecture. I'm just hitting the parts of it. Wabi Sabi does not mean is not the same as neglect. It's not just letting things decay. It involves care. TLC. It's curious to me. Clients are always saying that their houses just need a little TLC. And there's something significant about that, about using that phrase, because what they need is a carefulness and there's an affection that goes on with that. But notice that when we restored this frame, that's called a scarf repair, where you cut out the decayed wood and replace it. But we only took out as much as we needed to. We kept as much of the original as possible. Here's an example of wabi-sabi repair and two more examples. So notice how they're not making it look brand new. They're just, and they're not even hiding the repair work. They're just making it beautiful. So I've got a riddle for you. When does a scratch in a cherry table you inherited from your grandparents become a beauty mark? When it no longer looks like a scratch. The problem with scratches and the reason they're so visible is because they're mechanical. They look mechanical. A lot of times when we're sanding out scratches like that, we don't sand out the whole thing. We just sand out enough for it to look organic again. Here's an example of that. This is that in that room we restored. That's the windowsill. This is the room with the stained glass in it. And this is we could have easily filled that gap with epoxy or a scarf repair, but the client is someone who appreciates wabi sabi, and she recognized that it has gone beyond the stage of an imperfection and has achieved a kind of organic quality, and with that achieves a distinction and a value. There it is again. I think you can see on the right, just above the radiator, there's a little black mark. That's that blemish. This is a painting I was given by the artist. He explicitly made it so that it would decay, that it would change, not decay, but that it would age. So he used materials that would age, and so the painting is different all the time, and it just gets more appealing as it ages. Wabi sabi doesn't work well with most modern materials because they're so artificial. So it's hard to get a good patina on aluminum siding. That's the problem with the materials we have today is because they are so far removed from nature that they don't decay in a organic way. They're either new or they're ugly. But that wood on the left-hand side, quite old, quite pockmarked and aged, and yet it still has beauty. What happens to a wooden structure when it reaches 100 years of age? Well, in our culture, wood achieves antique status at 100 years of age. In wabi-sabi tradition, it acquires a soul. Now, whether you believe that or not, what it suggests is that as things age, they become more distinctive. And they do take on a quality of almost a living quality. That's, in fact, I think this is why we have haunted houses, because there's this sense of presence there. Aged artifacts achieve a liveliness. This is curly birch. It's all over Chicago. It's just amazing wood. And you can imagine a wood nymph running across that door. Kintsugi is part of, boy, I'm going to have to cut through some of this. I think I'm going to pass through Kintsugi so that we can get to at least say something about period appropriate enhancements. Restoration doesn't need to be rigid. Architectural integrity can be intensified by enhancement of elements that are consistent with the period and architectural style of the house. I'm just going to show you one example. This is an arts and crafts condo unit. It's huge. It's like a whole house. That hallway is 40 feet long. And so the first thing we did was apply a lime wash finish on the wall to give it an organic quality and a sense of a kind of a path, not so much a hallway, but a path. And then we added dragonfly stencils. Now those dragonflies are all heading from east to west, and serendipitously, while we were applying the stencils, the homeowner happened to be reading a book about black elk, and he was talking about dragonflies, which are a symbol of the Iraqi Indians, warriors, and they have a sense of movement from the east to the west. So we were consistent with black elk in conceiving, but we wanted to have a sense of movement here. The homeowner originally asked me to do a stencil of a tree, and I said I'd be happy to do that in your living room or your dining room, but not your hallway because your hallway is about movement. Living room and dining rooms dwell; they're about sitting. So I think I will leave it there so that we at least have some time for questions. Carla?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. If you could unshare, well, you don't have to unshare your screen actually, because you might want to jump back. We we have one question so far, so apparently you covered things pretty well. Somebody was asking how you pull up carpet off of the hardware floors. What's your strategy for that?
Well, it's carefully because it's held down by pieces of wood that have tacks in them. Those are around the perimeter. That's if it's good. If it's a good if they did a good job, they didn't glue it down to the floor. If they glued it to the floor, then that's an
Yeah.
entirely different story. But you just have to pull it away from those boards at the edges, and um, you have to be careful not to because you're gonna poke your hands. Then those boards have to come up as well.
Got it. Okay. So just around the perimeter typically. Okay, got a couple more in. Did bungalows originally have crown molding? Mine doesn't, but I want to add some.
Some of them did. Mine did has crown molding,
Yeah, I
and I
think
did
they're pretty
restore it.
common. Yeah.
Yeah. There are lots of different styles of bungalows, and so I would say just be sure that what you put in is compatible with the profile of your other moldings, and ideally you would get a um, crown molding that is the same shape as or close to. And I know one millwork shop, Skokie Millworks, and I think other millwork shops do this too. You show them the profile that you have, and they have a stock of they've been making knives forever, and so they have many knives, and they will give you a lower price to mill the wood with one of their existing knives. If you want to go all out, then you have a knife made to the exact proportions of your trim, and then you get an exact reproduction, but that's a more costly endeavor.
Okay. And I have a question in terms of in terms of the molding in general. What I learned was that it was basically because we didn't have the precision when we were building then. It was sort of a function of hiding the, any imperfections in the junction between the ceiling and the wall. So really it was a practical thing in the sense of like, we're trying to cover up this shifting that could happen or this, imprecision.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that, but that certainly makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it seems right. Based on
And
how
in
all these
fact,
buildings have shifted over the years.
I had I had to rip out my ceiling and get it replastered. And so the plasterer, he knew I was putting the crown molding in, so he didn't make tight corners. He left it like that.
Exactly, right. That'll save you a lot of time. We've got just a bundles of that. Okay. Do you have tips for getting paint out of the wood grain when removing paint to restain? It's a good question.
Okay, so you have stripped out I assume you've stripped out the kind of context. I'll have to interpret the context. So we use a heat gun, infrared heat, to get the top layers of stain off, and then we use the safe stripper, and our favorite is citrus strip, and we use citrus strip to get the residual coloring out. And if there's paint in the grain, the final thing is to use brass bristle brushes. They look like toothbrushes. You can buy them at Ace Hardware. You're better off going online and buying them in bulk because they're much cheaper. But brass does not damage the wood, especially if you're on oak. If it's pine, you'd be a little bit more careful. But using the citrus strip and then using the brass bristle brush to scrub it, and then taking denatured alcohol to wipe it away. That's the best way to get paint out of the grain.
Okay, excellent. Um, where would you recommend an owner of a 100-year-old home start the restoration process? It's a big question.
Start with your most valuable um, item. That's one way to do it. Is to not think about it as doing everything, but to focus on those items that are worthy of that kind of devoted attention. The other thing you can do is choose something an all over, something that will affect a large part of the house. So do all of the trim, and you can do that incrementally. If you can learn more about that approach by listening to see my last webinar I presented
I was
here.
gonna say, you talk all about that in the last one, which we have all of our webinars are saved. If you go to chicagobungalow.org, you can go back and see the old webinars. That's the beauty of the webinar, is they're up there. I mean, I would say forever, but for however long, they're able to stay up there. But you can go back and see that because Jeff gives all these really great examples of like how to approach this. And in terms of like, the most sort of special piece, the prized piece in your home, like what could that look like? What's the sort of piece de resistance that can kind of get you started. And then you're like, okay, I have this awesome thing, and then sort of build around that gradually. Um, yeah, I'll
So
put
I would
that.
have one more answer to that question. I would say that the cheapest thing that you can do that will affect the whole house is invest in period colors. Paint
Yeah.
paint your rooms with period colors.
Mhm. Um, okay. Somebody wants to know where you learned your craft.
Um, well, I got a huge start with by working with my partner Art Perkins because he had been trained at the Smithsonian and he had 30 years of experience. So working with him was a kind of apprenticeship. Other than that, YouTube, colleagues,
YouTube's amazing.
colleagues. Yeah, there's a whole consortium of restoration workers, and then just by experience.
Mhm. Um, let's see. Somebody said that she'd noticed paint peeling underneath. Um, I noticed paint peeling and underneath it looks like shellac. Is it something plaster walls were covered with before covering with wallpaper or eventually paint?
Well, I'm assuming she's saying this is on walls, which is
Yeah.
unusual.
Right. So there's, yeah, paint on the walls, it's peeling a little and there's like a shellac seeming thing underneath it. Unless that's wallpaper and it's like some sort of a finish that's,
Yeah, it's hard to imagine them having put shellac on a wall. I mean, you
yeah,
could guess the way you could find out that is if you have a space where that's revealed, take some denatured alcohol, and if denatured alcohol softens it, then it is indeed shellac.
okay. Okay. Well, that's all we got then. Good timing. We have a couple minutes left. Can allow people to run free into the beautiful wild evening. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate this. Always fun. Of course, as you know, Angela and I were saying earlier, like the wabi sabi part is always our favorite. Um, kind of go deep with that, and it's just a lovely way to sort of, I think, approach life in general. So yeah, thank you so much, and we will see you soon. Also, reminder to everybody, you'll be getting an email with this recording. So stay tuned for that. It should be coming out in the next few days at some point. All right. Good night, everybody.